Good Yom Tov, Yidden, good Yom Tov. It's a big day today. Yutas Kislev, Chag HaGeula, Chag HaChagim, it's called, the holiday of holidays. Rosh Hashanah LeChasidus. And we're going to be learning a chapter of Rambam today that's a very Chassidish chapter. You couldn't ask for better. Hashem arranged that, at least at the end of today's Perek, there's going to be a very, very Chassidish perspective on Mashiach, which is so central to Chassidus. Chassidus is a prelude to Mashiach. There's two reasons why Chassidus was revealed specifically in this generation. Everybody asks, if Chassidus is so important, so why wasn't it around 2,000 years ago? So there's two answers. One answer is because as the world gets darker, you need a bigger light. When the challenges get harder, you have to have a bigger light to combat it. That's like the cheaper answer. The better answer is that it's a preparation for Mashiach. Because when Mashiach comes, Hashem is going to be revealed, so we have to start now training ourselves to see Hashem in everything. So that's the Nekuda of Chassidus. And this point we're going to see at the end of today's chapter as well. This day should be a blessing for all those who need blessing, financially, spiritually, shidduch, children. It's a big, big day, very, very spiritually potent, and Hashem should bless everybody with a good year, learning Chassidus and in the ways of Chassidus. L'chaim. Hilchos Parah Adumah Perek Shlishi, the laws of the red cow, chapter 3. We've talked a little bit about the cow itself, and we've talked a little bit about the preparation, all the stringencies that went into preparing to get the red cow ready, for the really to get the water ready for the ash to be mixed in it. But now we're going to talk about the actual process of slaughtering and burning the red cow to prepare its ashes. And as we're going to see, the Rambam is going to give us a very detailed procedure with a lot of specifics, and the commentaries comment on the reasons for each of the specifics, and it's basically an easy chapter because it just goes through a process of how they used to do it, but a very significant one dealing with every single prat, every single detail in the Parah Adumah's process. So the Rambam says, Halacha Aleph, Ein serfin asapara ela chutz laharabayis. They wouldn't burn the red cow inside the Temple Mount, only outside the Temple Mount. Shenemar, because the verse actually says, V'hoitzi oisa el michutz lamachana. You need to take it out of the camp. In fact, says the Rambam, Uvahar hamishcha hayu serfin oisa. They didn't just take it out of the Temple Mount, they took it out of Yerushalayim. They used to go to the Har HaZeitim, Mount of Olives, which is technically outside the border of the old city of Yerushalayim, and that's where they would burn the Parah Adumah. Yeah, Har HaMishcha, Mishcha means oil. So Har HaMishcha is identical to Har HaZeitim. That's what some commentaries say. Others say that no, that Rambam is literal. He means that you would burn it in Yerushalayim, just outside of the Har HaBayis, but that's not the commonly accepted approach. They used to make a ramp. This is the ramp that we're looking at, straight from the Temple Mount all the way to the mountain. And this ramp was constructed in a very special way. V'tachtav banui kipin. The area under it was built in a series of arches. V'kipa al kol shtei kipin, with another layer of arches over every two arches. So it's not exactly accurate over here, but basically the idea. Every two arches we had another arch on top of it. Besides for the structural strength of such a ramp, there was a halachic reason for this. This creates the structure where two legs of one arch are leaning on the roof of two other arches, which creates the possibility for there to be a hollow under the entire area, which protected from unknown graves. Everything in the preparation of the Parah Adumah had to be fully pure. So while they're walking from here to here, we didn't want to bump into any problematic graves. So they made a ramp which would avoid the tumah, because once tumah hits a roof with a tefach by a tefach of space, that roof blocks the tumah from spreading. And so even if there was an unknown grave, it wouldn't spread. Af mekayim sreifasa, or mekayim hatvila, shahayu behara mishcha, says the Rambam even further, the place where they used to burn it, and the place where they used to go to the mikveh, there was a small mikveh there on the mountain. Even after they crossed this ramp, tachtei and cholol, also over there, that area on the mountain was also hollow underneath, mipnei kever hatahim, to avoid any unknown graves of the depths. The hapara, the hasoiref, the chola mesadin bisreifasa, the cow the Kohen who was appointed to burn the cow, and anybody who was needed to help with the burning, Yotzin meharabayis laharamishcha al gabi kevesh zeh, would go out from the harabayis all the way to the haramishcha using this ramp. There's some discussion in the commentaries why the cow had to go. Cow, while it's still alive, cannot be susceptible to impurity. So who cares where the cow used to go? But others used to say that it was just to advertise the mitzvah, not so much for the cow itself. Halacha Beis, Ketzad Serfe Noisa. What indeed was the process for burning the red cow? So first thing, Ziknei Yisrael, the elders of Israel, the Sanhedrin, Hayu Makdimin B'Ragleian Laharamishcha. They would take a walk by foot. They would go ahead to the Mount of Olives, Ubeis Tvila Hayasham, where there was a place of immersion in the mikveh. The Kohen, the Hamisadin Bisreifasa, Veha Parah, and then the Kohen, the people helping, and the cow itself, Yotzin al HaKevesh, Ubayin Laharamishcha. They would go out to the ramp and arrive in the Mount of Olives. As we saw the other day, the sages would purposely make the Kohen impure, so that he can go to the mikvah and be a Tuvul Yoim, and be able to do the Parah Adumah in that state. And the elders, the Sanhedrin, would lean their hands on the Kohen's head, and they would say to him, Tuvail achas, dip once. They would say once, because other times you have to dip multiple times. Here you dip once. If it was the high priest, because the high priest also was able, if he wanted to do the Parah Adumah, they would say to him with respect, Ishi Kohen Gadol, Tuvail achas. My master, the high priest, please dip once. He went down to the mikveh and immersed. He came up and he dried himself. Every detail in halacha is exact. Obviously, he'll dry himself. If a person gets wet, he'll dry himself. Why does halacha have to say he has to dry himself? So either because he didn't want to make the bigdei kahuna, the kohanic garments, dirty, or some commentaries say if he would leave the water on, if he wouldn't dry it intentionally, then it might be a chatzitza. It could be considered an intervening substance between his body and the bigdei kahuna. And then he would approach the pile. The eitzim misudarim hayusham. There were piles of wood set up over there. This is not so accurate, but it just brings out the point. Arazim, aloinim, or some have aroinim, uvreishim. There was cedar wood, there was oak wood, there was pine wood. Va'atze te'ena chalaka, and also smooth branches of fig wood. Why these woods? So there's two reasons in the commentaries. One is because they burn fast, and also because they produce lots of ash. And the whole thing with the Parah Adumah is we're looking for ash, because we need the ash to mix with the water. So the more ash we can get, the better. So they had all these different types of wood. And then they would make the pile of wood like a tower, like a teepee, wider on the bottom, narrower on the top. And they would open windows, meaning, maybe back to here is better also. They would set up the wood in such a way that there was opening where the air can come in, so that fire can catch easily to the wood. The opening of the wood pile, that means the place where he would ignite it, was facing west. Because, let's see if we can see it better in this picture. Here. You can see over here that this ramp that went straight from the Harabayis to the Haramishcha, so standing here, you were able to face directly the temple structure. The temple structure is to the west. So they made sure that in this pile, that the opening where they would ignite it would face the Heichal, would be to the west. V'koifsin es hapara b'chevel shel mogog, or megeg. They would tie down the cow with a rope of megeg. Megeg is either reed or love grass. One of these two, they make a long, nice, thick rope out of it. And the reason they chose that one was because it's not susceptible to impurity. And again, we wanted to avoid impurity at all costs. This is while it's still alive. We tied down the cow. While it's alive, we put it on top of the pile. So you have to understand, this pile was very, very strong. I know here it's only 4 layers of wood. It was a big thing. It could hold the cow. They brought the cow onto the pile. With its head, meaning its general direction of its body was to the south, but then its head was turned to the west. So in this context, this side here is south. So the whole cow was situated towards the south, but they turned its head to face west to face down there where the Beis HaMikdash was. By the way, the same position was used on Yom Kippur also. When the Kohen Gadol did the vidu on the bull, that's how he would situate the cow. Body towards the south, head turned towards the west. The Kohen who was dealing with the cow, he stands in the east, that's back over here, facing west. And he would slaughter the cow. Where's my slaughtering picture? There it is. There it is. He would slaughter it with his right hand and then receive the blood in his left hand. Then, by the way, not into a cup. This is literally in his left hand. The blood is in his left hand. He would sprinkle with a finger from his right hand, min hadam shebekapei hasmalis, from the blood in his left hand, sheva pa'amim keneged beis kodshei HaKodashim, 7 times, sprinkling towards the area of the Holy of Holies, westward. Al kol hazah tvilas etzba bedam. For every time he sprinkled, he had to dip his finger again in the blood. And the commentaries note over here, this is not said by the Parah Adumah. In other cases, when the high priest brings a bull for an erroneous ruling, or when a mitzayra, person has tzaras and he gets sprinkled on there, the Torah says, v'toval v'hiza. He needs to dip and sprinkle. Dip and sprinkle. But over here, Torah doesn't say dip and sprinkle, yet the Rambam learns it from there. Same principle. Every time you sprinkle, you have to do a new immersion of the finger into the blood. Now, once he sprinkles once, whatever blood remains on this finger is forbidden to be used again in a second sprinkling or a third sprinkling. Therefore, al kol hazah mekaneach etzboi begufa shel parah. Therefore, after every sprinkle, he would wipe his finger clean on the body of the cow that's now dead, lying on the pile of wood. He would wipe it onto the cow. In other similar cases we find in halacha, he would wipe it onto the surface of the cup. Why didn't he wipe it down on the surface of the cup? So either because he wasn't using a cup, but more specifically, because as we're going to see soon, there's a mitzvah to burn every part of the cow, including its blood. So whatever you can put into the pile that's going to be burnt, extra blood, clean it onto the cow. Better that way. Then, Gamar Mila Hazois, when he finished sprinkling, Mekaneach Yodav Begufa Shel Parah, he again cleans all of his hands that are full of blood on the body of the cow. V'yored min ha'ma'aracha, and he goes down from where the wood pile was. V'hitzis es ha'esh be'etzim ketan. Like we do today. You get some starter, right? You don't just set fire to logs. The way you do it is you set fire to small pieces of wood, small wood chips, and then he puts them in under the big logs of the pile. So the fire begins to cackle and begins to take hold. The Kohen stands at a distance and he watches until the fire catches hold to most of it and its stomach opens, because the next step has to be done when the cow reaches this stage. The next step is to throw a mixture of certain things inside the cow. It says, El toich sreifas hapara, into the area of the burning cow. So the cow has to actually open to allow for this procedure to take place. Once the Kohen observes that the fire took hold of most of it and the stomach has opened, the achar kach noitel eitz erez ve'ezev. Then the Kohen takes a piece of cedar wood, right over here, and ezev. Ezev, there's multiple opinions what ezev is. The most common translation is that ezev is hyssop. This one over here. However, just to give you some fun, some say it's oregano, some say it's sage, some say it's marjoram. Is that how you pronounce it? Marjoram. And some say it's thyme. Yeah. Many different opinions about the ezev. The most common one, again, is the hyssop plant. But he takes some cedar wood, we'll just call it hyssop, okay? Ein paches mitefach, no less than a tefach in length. V'tzemer tzavua b'toilas, and some wool that was dyed with the scarlet worm. The Rambam will soon talk about this. There's an actual worm that exudes this red dye. Even in the Mishkan, Tolat Shani talks about crimson using the red wool. Comes from this worm. They actually found recently, I don't know if you saw those small pieces from like thousands of years ago that were dyed with this red dye from the scarlet worm. So he would take the wood, the ezev, and this wool. Mishkal chamisha sloim. The wool had to weigh 5 selas, and because each of these species is very specific and unique, and you had to take the right one, so the Kohen would confirm with everybody standing around that he's using the right materials. He would tell those standing around. Who was standing around? All the helpers in the Sanhedrin, whoever was there. He would hold up these things. He would say, Eitz erazeh, Eitz erazeh, Eitz erazeh. Tell me, is this the cedar wood of the Torah? Is this the cedar wood? Is this the cedar wood? Ezev zeh, Ezev zeh, Ezev zeh. Is this the hyssop? Hyssop, hyssop. Shni telazeh, Shni telazeh, Shni telazeh. Is this the proper red wool that we have to use? Shalish pa'amim al kol echad ve'echad, 3 times each question. The hein emrim le, and they would answer him, hein, hein, hein. Yes, yes, yes. Shalish pa'amim al kol echad ve'echad, 3 times for each one. Why? What was the point of this procedure? V'kol kach lama. Why did they do this so much? Lefi says that Rambam, because what does the Torah say? Torah says you take some cedar wood, hyssop, and wool. But it doesn't say which ones. Lefi shemine arazim shivahin. As we know, there are 7 different types of cedar wood. Umine ezev arba. And there are at least 4 different types of ezev plants. And when you're talking about red dye can come from multiple places. Some people will make red dye by using pua. Pua is either madder root, or it's the rubia plant, or it's the woad plant. One of these 3 produce a red dye. Some paint red dye with what's called laka sap from this tree. Also creates a red dye. And only some people make red dyes with a scarlet worm, as the Torah desires. What is the scarlet worm? Says the Rambam, Hi hagargarim ha'adumim biyoser. They look like these very, very red pits. This is a zoom up picture, but actually that's how it looks when it's small. It looks like a red pit. Hadoimim legarine hacharuvim, that are similar to carob seeds. Mamash hazay. Look at the carob; it looks very identical to it. The hin kemay ha'oig. They're also like the sumac berries. That's these. Very identical. The telas kemayatush yesh bechol garger mehen. In every one of these pits, there is a worm the size of a mosquito, and you get the worm's secretions, it creates a red dye. So because there's many different ways to arrive at the same result, therefore the Kohen, by holding it up and by asking the question, he notifies everybody, he reveals to them, that these are the ones that Torah means. Not the other 6 cedar woods, this one. Not the other 4 hyssops, this one. What is the hyssop spoken about in the Torah? It's the common spice, herb, that regular homeowners use and eat, and they use it to spice different dishes. This is where the difference of opinion comes in, if it's thyme, if it's oregano, if it's sage, different things. Anyway, he gets these 3 things. You have to have all 3. All 3 are essential to each other. If you don't have all 3, you can't do the next part of the process. So once he has all 3 things, what does he do with them? Using the wool strand, he would tie together the hyssop and the cedar wood, and throw it into the open stomach of the cow. Shenemar, because it says, he was to throw it inside the burning area of the cow. And you have to be very precise. You can't throw it in before the fire takes hold of the majority, nor after it already becomes ash. If you threw it in one of these time periods, psula, it's disqualified. Shenemar, because it says el toich sreifas, inside the burning. Not before the fire takes hold, and not after it becomes ash. Chazon Ish points out, he says, there's a difference between the 2. If you throw it in after it's already ash, so you missed it, there's no way to fix it. But if you threw it in too early, you can quickly get new ones and throw it in at the right time. Even though the ideal mitzvah is to tie them together and throw them in at once, but it doesn't matter whether you threw it in at once or you threw one after the other, whether you threw it actually into the open body or into the burning area, whether the fire itself tore open the cow's belly on its own, and then you threw in the stuff, or you saw it wasn't going, so you took a knife or your hands and you tore the stomach open yourself. In all these scenarios, as long as you threw it in, you're good. Halacha Gimel Nigmar Sreifasa, once the burning was over, Special kohanim would come with sticks, and they would pound the remains with sticks. The cow and all the wood that was burnt with it. The whole thing became part of the potential ash that was going to be used later. And then they would sift everything with sifters. As you see this guy over here, he's doing. Any black particle that could be ground further and become ash, whether it came from the flesh of the cow or from the wood, you would crush it till it became ash. Because the mitzvah is to use ash. You cannot use, unground stuff. If you find a black particle that is not turning into ash, it's still very tough, you leave it back into the smoldering area of the burning of the Parah Adumah to allow it perhaps to become ash. Any bone which remained and was not burnt, whether or not it was caught on fire and it could turn to ash, it would still be ground. The bones would be ground. Commentaries raise the issue here. If it wasn't naturally burnt, how could you grind it and add it to the ash pile? It's a big discussion. Anyways, they would purposely take all the stuff and hit it and bang it and create the ash. Now, once you have the ash, what do you do with the ash? Halacha Dalet says the Rambam, Ein machnisin klum me'efra lahaniche ba'azara. We don't take any of the ash actually inside the temple courtyard. Shenemar, because it says, right here, literally, a person should gather the ash, v'hiniach michutz lamachane. He should leave it outside of the camp. Where do they actually put it? Ushleisha chalakim hayuchilkin is called efra. They used to divide all the ash of a Parah Adumah into 3 parts. Echad nitan bechel. One was placed in the chel. Where's the chel? The chel is this area around, over here, the fence that divided, where non-Jews could no longer enter, or people that were impure from a dead body could no longer enter. This was the chel. The Tosfos Yom Tov says that it was placed at the very entrance of the Ezras Nashim. And he actually explains that what we said yesterday in yesterday's chapter, Pesach Shel Azara, that at the entrance to the Azara there was a tube of ash, that's this one. The entrance to the Ezras Nashim, over here. The Echad Bahar HaMishcha, 1/3 of it was left on the Mount Olives, where it was initially burnt. The Echad Mischalik L'chol HaMishmaris. And one was divided to all the Mishmaris. Now Mishmaris typically means the groups of Kohanim, 24 rotations. But here the Rambam writes in his commentary to the Mishnah that it means the 24 locations around the temple where the Kohanim and the Leviim used to guard by nights. Remember from the 8th book? There was different guards every night, 24 different places. So they would put the ashes a little bit in each of the places. The third that was put in all the watch places, that was the one that was used by Kohanim. If Kohanim ever became impure from dead body, they needed to have ash purity, it was from that ash. The part that was left on the Mount of Olives, that was one that the Jews, regular Jews, used to use to sprinkle. The third that was placed in the chel, that was there not to be used, but to be ready and to be hidden away. Shenemar, because the verse clearly says that a part of the Parah Adumah's ashes, the hoysal la'adas b'nei Yisrael l'mishmeres, needed to be guarded for the community of the Jewish people. These words teach us that you're supposed to hide part of it. That's the mitzvah. The way you fulfill the mitzvah is part for sprinkling, part just to be there. They used to hide a little bit of the ash, all the ashes of all the cows that they burnt in history, they would put it in the chel. And the Rambam, as the Rabbi explains it now, wants to prove to us that this mitzvah was fulfilled throughout the entirety of history. V'teisha pares adumais nasu, 9 red cows have been made. Misha nitztavu b'mitzvah zu ad shecharav habayis bashniya. From the moment that they got the mitzvah first from Moshe Rabbeinu until the second temple was destroyed, uninterrupted flow of fulfillment of this part of the mitzvah. There was always some ash available from the beginning of the commandment till the second temple was destroyed. Rishayna asa Moshe Rabbeinu. The first one was made by Moshe Rabbeinu. Shniya asa Ezra. The second one was made by Ezra. Why does he mention these two? Because both of these two deal with Jewish eternity. They represent Jewish eternity. V'sheva me Ezra ad churban abayis, and 7 more from Ezra until the second temple was destroyed, which is an amazing thing. 1 cow, 1 Parah Adumah lasted from Moshe Rabbeinu's times till the second temple times. And just the second temple era required itself 8 more cows. So, a very big contrast. V'ha'asiris yasa hamelech hamashiach meheira yigale. And the 10th one will be made by King Mashiach, In other words, the Rambam is saying, we're still waiting. Since the Second Temple times, we haven't had a chance to do this part of the mitzvah of having some ash put away. We're waiting for the 10th one to be done by King Mashiach, Mehera Yigala, who will be revealed very speedily. And what does the Rambam add over here, according to most texts? Amen ken yehi ratzon. Amen, and so may it be Hashem's will. Why does the Rambam add that? What is he? It's a prayer from Mashiach. He should put this in the laws of Mashiach. Why does he put a prayer here? We're not talking about Mashiach. Mashiach comes up, as an aside. But the Rebbe says from here you learn that when somebody is involved in something, it always comes out of them. If you're involved in Mashiach, even if you mention Mashiach as a side point, right away you add a prayer. Amen ken yehi ratzon. So may it be Hashem's will. Hashem should bring Mashiach. The Rambam couldn't help himself. He mentions Mashiach as a Mashiach Jew. A prayer comes out. What do we learn from here? Same thing has to be with us and Chassidus, us and Mashiach. Mashiach has to be on the tip of our tongue. All the esoteric wisdom of the inner dimension of Torah has to be on the tip of our tongue. We have to always be talking about it. Even talking about breakfast or talking about work, Mashiach has to come into the conversation. And when it does, we offer a prayer and we say, Amen ken yehi ratzon, and so may it be Hashem's will, that Mashiach should come now.